What's up guys, Sagi here and welcome to another Tech Gear Talk. Today we're going to check out the Canon EOS M50, which is the first entry-level mirrorless camera from Canon to offer 4K video. We're going to talk about why this is a great camera for beginner photographers, for vlogging, and for anyone who wants to create video for YouTube. There's also a great deal going on right now, and I'm going to mention it at the end of this video. So if you're considering buying this camera, end of story. You should use one of the links in the description and buy it right now. You're not going to get a better price. The M50 is the newest mirrorless camera from Canon, and it's nice to see that they're continuing to develop this line of cameras. And the reason why mirrorless cameras have become popular over the last few years is because they're so small and portable. Now this camera has some really great specs, but there are also some limitations that you should be aware of, especially if you're going to use it for vlogging. So make sure that you watch the more in-depth explanation. My goal with every product review is to give you an overview of the features in a way that relates to real-life use. And if this video is helpful, please let me know by leaving a comment, giving it a like, and then hitting the subscribe and notification buttons for more camera and tech reviews. I'm going to get into the details of each aspect of this camera, but I'm going to start out by giving you an overview of some of the features. The M50 has a 24.1 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor, and it uses Canon's super nice dual pixel autofocus system. It has the brand new Digic 8 processor, which improves speed and performance, as well as image quality. We have a 3-inch fully articulating touchscreen LCD, and it can shoot video at up to 4K at 24 frames per second. Now, combination IS uses 5-axis digital image stabilization with lens-based IS. And there's a really nice OLED electronic viewfinder. It has Wi-Fi with NFC and Bluetooth, so you can easily move images to your mobile device. And one of the things I'm most excited about is the fact that you now have full control of the camera for both photography and video using the Canon Camera Connect app. And I'll get into that towards the end of this video. Like I said, I've been waiting for months to get my hands on this camera, and I'm really excited for this review. I did a live unboxing and Q&A session about the M50, so if you're interested, I'll link to it up in the corner and in the description. Again, I love seeing that Canon is continuing to develop the M line, so let's go ahead and jump into the features in more detail. Now, the M50 comes with a really impressive 24.1 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor. Now, Canon says that it's the same sensor that's used on the M5, M6, M100, and then several Canon DSLRs. I think this is a great sensor for an entry-level camera because you're getting outstanding performance without breaking the bank. In general, a bigger sensor is better, and a bigger sensor is better because it's able to use more information to get an image with more detail and better dynamic range. And this APS-C sensor is going to be great for landscape photography, if you're doing street photography, or if you want to take this camera on the road with you when you travel, or even just doing family and lifestyle photography. It's also a great choice if you want to create video or content for YouTube. It's going to give you really sharp, crisp video, and of course Canon's color science is awesome. That was the sensor. Let's talk a little bit about the processor. And here Canon uses the new Digic 8 processor, which should give this camera a leg up over its predecessors. And together with a really nice sensor, you're gonna get sharper images in video and better low light performance. The Digic 8 also makes the camera really nice and responsive for both photography and video. General menu operation is fast, it has very quick startup, and then things like image preview and video playback are really fast. Now for photography specifically, the Digic 8 processor lets the M50 shoot at 7.4 frames per second with continuous autofocus. And if you're shooting with single shot autofocus, you can go up to 10 frames per second. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to get focus and then just hold the shutter down. And you can hear the M50 is just continuing to fire. Now this is a really nice feature if you're photographing your kids running around, or if you're at a sporting event, or anytime you're photographing subjects that move. And then finally, from a video standpoint, the Digic 8 processor lets the M50 shoot at up to 4K at 24 frames per second. Okay, so let's continue to talk about resolution and frame rate. I already mentioned that you can shoot at 4K at up to 24 frames per second. You can also shoot at full HD or 1080p at 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. And this comes down to what you want your video to look like. If you like a more cinematic or softer look, then you're gonna go with 24 frames per second. If you like video that's more crisp and sharp, then you might wanna go with 60 frames per second. I like to be somewhere in the middle, and I edit almost all of my videos at 30 frames per second. And because I usually shoot and edit at 30 frames per second, I can shoot some footage at 60 frames per second and then do slow motion by 50%. Now, if you want to do additional slow motion, the M50 does have the ability to shoot at 120 frames per second, but that's only at 720p. So you'll be able to slow things down more, but you'll be giving up some resolution in order to do that. I already mentioned a few times that the M50 can shoot at 4K at up to 24 frames per second. And that is something that's been missing for most Canon cameras. But there are some limitations that you should be aware of if that's something that you're planning on using. The first one is pretty obvious. It can only shoot at 24 frames per second. So any footage that I show you in this video, I have to interpolate at 30 frames per second. And of course, I can't shoot at 60 frames per second, but that's not something that I expect at this price point. Another really important distinction is that when you shoot 4K, the M50 doesn't use the entire sensor. So it uses a windowed or cropped portion of the sensor. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is because now you have to apply another 1.6 crop factor to the focal length of the lens. So that's only important when you're shooting in 4K, but if you're vlogging and trying to hold the camera at arm lengths away, or if you're in a tight space, that's gonna be something that might be an issue for you. Let me explain this in a little more detail, just in case you're not sure what crop factor means. APS-C sensors, like the one in the M50, already have a 1.6 times crop factor, which means that when you look at a lens that says it's 15 to 45, you actually have to multiply that by 1.6 in order to get the 35mm equivalent. So a 15 to 45 actually ends up being a 24 to 72. That means that at the widest point, you're actually shooting at 24 instead of 15. Now, if you're shooting in 4K, you're now adding another 1.6 crop factor. So now the 15 to 45 actually becomes a 38.4 to 115.2, which is gonna be great for portraits or for talking head video if you have enough room, but is really going to be a problem if you're trying to handhold this camera. And I'll show you some examples of the difference between 1080p and 4K when I'm holding this camera, so you can really get a visual explanation of this difference. We'll get into some more lens options which will help alleviate some of this, and let me know in the comment section below if this is something that's important to you. And I always like to mention when I talk about 4K that this is a personal choice, and you should ask yourself, is this something that I'm even going to use? Do I even have a computer that can reasonably edit 4K footage? And I know that the term gets thrown around a lot, so 4K this, 4K that, but again, ask yourself, is this something that you actually plan on using right now? Okay, so that's a perfect transition to start talking about some lens options. Like all the other mirrorless cameras, the M50 uses the EF-M mount, and the kit lens that I got is a 15 to 45mm lens with image stabilization. One of the things that I really like about Canon cameras is that there are tons of lens options. So if you want to go wider than this, there's a really nice 11 to 22mm lens that you should think about picking up. And then if you want some more telephoto, then there's a 50 to 200, which is also a great option. Now, if the M line of lenses is not enough for you, you can buy adapters from Canon and other manufacturers. And these adapters will let you put EF or EFS mount lenses on the M body. And again, I know I mentioned it before, but remember the crop factor, so whenever you're looking at lenses for this camera, remember that you're multiplying them by 1.6. So one last time, this 15 to 45 is actually a 24 to 72 if you're comparing it to a full frame sensor. So that's true when you're shooting at full HD or 1080p. But going back to 4K, if you picked up that 11 to 22, it's actually going to be a 28 to 56. So that's a limitation when it comes to shooting wide, but there is a benefit to it, because if you pick up the 55 to 200, it now becomes a 140 to 512 millimeter, which is an awesome telephoto range. And the most important thing is that you have a lot of lens options. So you're not stuck with a fixed lens. You may start out by just buying a kit lens like this 15 to 45, and then slowly add lenses as your needs change and you realize, oh, I want to go wider than what I have, or I want to be able to zoom in more than what I can with this lens. All right, so next, let's talk about continuous autofocus. And that's something that's important, and you're not going to want to overlook that when you're shopping for a camera. And the good news here is that Canon used the Dual Pixel autofocus system, which I love. This is an area where Canon made a significant improvement. The M5, for example, has 49 autofocus points, whereas the M50 has 143 autofocus points. So that's almost triple the amount, and now it covers a much larger portion of the sensor. This is one of the nicest, if not the nicest, autofocus system on the market. And with eye detection, it does an outstanding job at identifying and tracking faces even as they move through the frame. So the person could be getting closer to the camera and farther away, moving left to right, and the Dual Pixel autofocus system is gonna have no problems keeping them in focus. This is really important when you're vlogging or walking around with the camera, and people sometimes don't realize how small movements just from front to back can really affect focus. And like I said before about the Dual Pixel autofocus system, Canon just crushed it. Like, you seriously just don't even think about focus anymore. You're going to be in focus. So whether you click on a subject and let the camera follow it, or just point it at yourself or at someone else and it will automatically identify and track their faces, again, just completely forget about it. Your video and your images are going to be in focus. If you're creating content for YouTube, this is even more important because now you're in front of the camera rather than behind it. So at least when you're behind the camera, you can see if something's in focus or not. But now when you're in front of the camera, you can flip this screen, you can see that it will draw a square around your face, and then you can just be comfortable that you can just go on with creating your video and you know the camera is taking care of focus. Now, another thing that I can do is click on different items on the screen and I can easily change focus. So I can get a really cool transition where in my video I talk about one thing and then I want to shift the viewer's attention to something else. I can bring it into focus. And I don't need to worry about pulling focus or messing around with the focus ring. I can just click on the subject and I know the camera is gonna bring it into focus. And look at how fast it does this. And there's no hunting for focus. You know, like when the camera puts things in and out of focus because it's not really sure what you wanna focus on. There's none of that junk with the Dual Pixel autofocus. Now, one of the things that I wanted to point out that was disappointing is, again, when you shoot in 4K, the M50 doesn't use the Dual Pixel autofocus system. Instead, it uses contrast detection to maintain focus. So it still does a pretty good job, but it's definitely not as good as the Dual Pixel. For photography, what's cool is you can use the screen with the Dual Pixel autofocus system. Even if you're using the EVF or the electronic viewfinder, you can pop this screen out to the side and then use your thumb with your offhand to set and move focus while you're shooting. Now, setting focus with the screen while using the electronic viewfinder wasn't something that was enabled by default, so I'll create another quick video where I explain how to turn it on and then how to use it. And what's nice here is that if you wanted to use the rule of thirds, for example, so you don't want your subject centered, you want him on a 1/3 line, you can go ahead and frame the shot the way that you want, click on the subject, and then you can see the point moving right on top of them, and then you can keep shooting. And if you want them on the other 1/3 line, you can do that very quickly without having to mess around with buttons here. And the really important part there for me is the speed and execution, because you can do this with most cameras. You can either set the focus and then reframe, but then you have to do it every time, or there are buttons here that you can move the focus point. But over here, I can just do it so much faster because while I'm shooting, I can use my other thumb to go ahead and move the focus point right on top of my subject. Okay, so let's move to another feature that I really love about the M50, and that's that Canon included a 3.5mm external mic input. And that means that I can get better audio by attaching an external microphone to the M50. So I can easily connect a shotgun mic and I'm all set. And this is a really nice and compact setup. It's light, you'll get great video and great audio, and it's just perfect for vlogging, for shooting talking head video, and really any time where you want to get more directional sound pickup instead of using the omnidirectional microphones that are built into the camera and are going to pick up sound from everywhere. And because the screen articulates to the side, you can mount your microphone right on the hot shoe without having the need for any type of bracket. And there are a lot of outstanding microphone options, and I'll put some links in the descriptions to some of my favorites. If I don't want to use a shotgun microphone, I can also attach a lavalier microphone if I don't mind being tethered to the camera. And if I want to step up my production and give myself some more flexibility, I can use a wireless lavalier mic, and then I'm not connected to the camera and I can get different types of shots without having to adjust my audio. And what's cool about that setup is now I have the dual pixel autofocus, so I know I'm in focus, and a wireless lavalier, so I know I'm getting good audio no matter where I am, how far I am from the camera. It's always perfect. All right, next let's talk about the size, weight, and build quality of the M50. We know it's a mirrorless camera, so it's already going to be small and light. And that's true for both the body itself and the lenses. And even with the kit lens, it's still only a little over a pound, which is really great for how powerful this camera is. Now, Canon also added a really nice OLED EVF, or electronic viewfinder, to the M50. And without this EVF, this camera would be about the size of the M100. I know that some photographers just like the idea of having the camera up to their eye, and at the same time, when you're outside and it's really bright, you're completely eliminating any issues that you might have with seeing the screen. Now, the body itself is made entirely of composite material, but it doesn't really feel cheap. It has a really nice grip, and it's deep for a mirrorless camera, and there's rubber all over it, like this entire side and the back. So it fits very securely in my hand, and I really like having a grip like this on this type of camera when I'm using it without a strap. And some cameras are a little too small, and I always feel like I'm gonna drop them, but this is actually pretty nice. All right, let's talk a little bit about the screen. The M50 has a fully articulating 3-inch touchscreen, which Canon calls vari-angle. And I think this is an absolute must for vloggers, for YouTubers, and it's just a feature that I like to have in general. So if I'm behind the camera, I can just flip it and then lock it back in place, and I'm good to go. On the other hand, if I'm in front of the camera, I can just flip it out to the side and look at myself, and again, I can see how I'm framed and I can see that I'm in focus. Now, I can also flip it up if the camera is on a slider, or any time where I'm looking down at the camera, if it's on a tripod or something like that. And then if I need to hold the camera up above my head, I can point the screen down and I can still see what the camera sees without having to, step back or mess around with anything. And when comparing this to other touch screens from other manufacturers, this is a full touchscreen. So I can set focus on it, but I can also control all the features and functions of the camera. I can use the menu, I can change focus mode, anything that I want to do, I can do using the touchscreen. And the screen is really bright and crisp, and it's worked great for me both indoor and outdoor. I like that the screen articulates to the side so that it doesn't interfere with a mic that's mounted on the hot shoe versus a screen that flips up. And ultimately, that creates a much more compact rig, which I prefer. All right, next, let's talk about connectivity options, and this is where Canon made a huge improvement. So like many of the other Canon cameras, the M50 has built-in Wi-Fi with NFC, or near field communication, which lets you use the Canon Camera Connect app to pair the camera with a smartphone or tablet, and then you can wirelessly share images and movies. Now, this is awesome when you're doing a shoot and you want to quickly post something to Twitter or Instagram. You can just immediately move the images to your phone, do a quick edit, and then post. So why did I say this was such a huge improvement if it's in other cameras? Well, that's because in the M50, Canon enabled full functionality for both photography and video. I mean, you have full control over all the features of the camera right from your phone. If you watch my M6 review, you saw how frustrated I was by the fact that I could only use the app for images and that I couldn't use it at all for video. Now, anytime when I'm in front of the camera, like in this situation, it's great to be able to control the camera with an app rather than having to get up and then sit back down every time I want to change something. So Canon took all this feedback and made a huge improvement with the M50. You can literally control everything: resolution, frame rate, focus mode, focus point, aperture, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, audio settings. Like, I'm super pumped about this. Again, I can't emphasize how important that is when you're working alone. It's easy when you have someone behind the camera because they can just change all the settings. But when you're alone, to be able to use your phone as both a remote monitor and to change the setting is priceless for me. And there is a small delay between what the camera is seeing and what you see on your phone, but it's definitely usable. And again, just having the flexibility to use it when I want to is awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the skill level that's needed to use this camera. And if you've gotten this far in the video, you know that the M50 was designed for beginner photographers and videographers. But at the same time, it has a ton of features and functionality that more advanced users are going to appreciate. So for beginners, you can just put it on auto and let the camera do everything for you, and then slowly learn how to use the features. But then more advanced users can put it on manual and then absolutely control everything. Okay, I also want to talk about some other features that might help you make a buying decision about the M50. First, I want to talk about image stabilization. And the M50 uses a 5-axis in-body digital image stabilization with lens-based image stabilization to get you a very stable image when you're hand holding the camera. Now remember that that's meant to help you, but as far as video goes, it's never gonna give you as smooth and buttery footage as you're gonna get with a 3-axis gimbal. And I'll put some links in the descriptions to some gimbals that are out there that I really like and would work very well with the M50. I already mentioned it before, but I want to highlight again the electronic viewfinder, which is super nice. And if you bought a camera like the M6, you could add one of these, but it would cost you another $200. So it's nice to see that Canon added it to the M50. Okay, next I want to talk about time-lapse. And it's not just the fact that the M50 can do in-body time-lapse, it's also that it's just so easy to do. So there are 3 preset time-lapse scenarios for like fast, slow, and slower moving subjects. And they'll automatically pick the right settings for your time-lapse. And if you want more control, so Canon also gives you a custom option, which again, you have full control over. So you can select the interval in seconds, which is how long is between each shot. And you can select how many shots you want the camera to take. And then finally, whether you want to auto expose each exposure or you want the camera to use the initial exposure for all the images. Now, once you select these settings, the camera will show you how long it will take to shoot and then how long the final time-lapse video will be. And I'll do a dedicated video to show you how to do different types of time-lapses using the M50. So if you're interested, make sure you hit the subscribe and notification buttons. And then finally, I want to mention that for photography, the M50 does have a built-in flash. And you literally just flip it up and flip it down. And it's a pretty decent flash for this size body. Okay, so I think the M50 is a great choice if you're looking for a mirrorless camera from Canon. It's a great camera to vlog, create video for YouTube, and also if you just want a nice portable camera for photography. The APS-C sensor and the Digic 8 image processor are a great combo and give you very nice results in low light. You can shoot 4K at 24 frames per second and then full HD or 1080p at up to 60 frames per second, which also lets you do slow motion at 50% if you edit your videos at 30 frames per second. I love the ability to have interchangeable lenses, and there are plenty of EFM options from Canon and other manufacturers, and you can start out with one lens and then add to your kit as your needs change or grow. The Dual Pixel autofocus is amazing. It's fast, it's reliable, and it does a great job at tracking faces and moving subjects through the frame, and it's perfect for both photography and video. I'm super happy about the mic input, which lets me connect an external microphone to the M50 and get much fuller audio without having to record it separately and then sync it in post-production. The articulating, or vari-angle as Canon calls it, screen is also a fantastic feature that I think anyone shooting stills or video is really going to appreciate. The M50 is super small and portable, and it's a great option for photographers that don't want a bulky or heavy camera with them. The size and particularly the weight are perfect for YouTubers and vloggers who want to be on the move. It's crazy light, but at the same time has a nice build quality, very secure grip, and an excellent electronic viewfinder. You can use the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to easily move images from the camera to a mobile device, and I'm super excited about the Canon Camera Connect app that now gives you full control over both photography and video features. And even though it's targeted at beginners, there's a ton of features and manual settings the more advanced users are really going to appreciate. And finally, we talked about built-in image stabilization and then the great time-lapse mode, which lets you easily get time-lapse movies with just a couple of clicks. When I got this camera, the body alone sold for $779, and then the kit with the 15 to 45 sold for $899, which is a great deal because you're saving $180 because the lens alone sells for $300. I'll put some links in the description that you can use if you want to support my channel, and I really appreciate it. And those links will always be updated so you're getting the lowest prices. All right, remember that I mentioned a crazy deal that's going on now? You can actually get the Canon M50 Creator Kit for $749. So you're getting the body, the 15 to 45mm lens, a Rode VideoMic Go, and a 32GB SDHC card for less than the price of the body when I got it. So honestly, if you're seriously thinking about getting this camera, just go and buy it right now. This is an awesome deal. The body alone is on sale right now for $629, and I put one of those links, and then the body with the kit lens is only $699. That's sick. I really hope this video gave you a good overview of the Canon M50. If it did, please let me know by giving it a thumbs up, tweet it, share it, and then hit the subscribe and notification buttons for more camera and tech reviews. You can always find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Tech Gear Talk. Good luck and see you soon.